Welcome to the Exploring Education podcast. I'm your host and teacher in training, Levi Danielson. So I'm super excited to get this started with you guys. I've never really done anything like this before. It's kind of a unique experience. Got all this crazy technology around me. I'll be watching all these screens around me, watching, recording, and all this stuff. I've got cameras set up. I got mics set up, but I'm super excited to get this started with everyone. So right now, I'm a junior at the University of Montana. I'm a level 2 student, nearing the end of my level 2 experience, hopefully, in the education program at the university as well, in the P.J. Washington School of Education. So I know that I don't have the repertoire of a professor or a teacher who's been teaching for 15 years, but I still felt like it'd be a super cool opportunity to share my opinions on school, my opinions on how school should be, and just my whole experience with school. So I thought it'd still be a super cool experience despite my relatively new experience with education. So hopefully in this podcast, we'll be able to go over my opinions, your opinions, everyone's opinions about education, what we can do better, and how we can improve our education system. So what I plan to talk about in this podcast is my personal experience in elementary school, and hopefully have some surprise guests come in, those being my mom and dad, talk about their experience in elementary school, and then also talk about my experience at observing and working in the elementary school in my time in the education program. And hopefully we'll be able to see how much elementary school has changed since the 1960s all the way to 2024. So it'll hopefully will be a super amazing experience for us all. So a little bit about myself. I'm from Sitka, Alaska, a small island rural town on like the southeastern peninsula of Alaska. So I don't know if any of you guys have seen the rom-com The Proposal, but that's supposed to be Sitka, Alaska. That's how a lot of people know it. But that's not really what it looks like. It's a island covered in forest, bears, and fishermen. And my family is a fishing family from Sitka, Alaska. We are a subsistence fishing family as well as a commercial fishing family. So we get the major amount of our income from fishing. So growing up in a small town like this, education is kind of different than other places. So I kind of wanted to talk about my elementary education experience in a small town like Sitka, Alaska. So I went to 2 elementary schools, 1 preschool. The preschool being Mount Edgecombe Preschool, a small, I think, volunteer-based preschool. A lot of the kids that I knew went to, and that was a really amazing experience. I don't really remember as much about it because I think I was a little too young to remember a lot of it. I remember like some feelings I had, but I really don't remember too much other than like who my crush was, or I had a Jello party. There was cockroaches there, like weird stuff like that. So my experience in elementary school was a little bit different than most people's. Coming from a small island town in Alaska, it's definitely not what people expect when it's elementary school. It was definitely a little bit behind in the timing of like what was happening with like technology. Our schools only had 1 computer lab. I think we might have had 1 computer cart that was able to go 2 different classrooms during the day, but really we had 1 computer lab for technology in the schools. We had playgrounds they were really big and often on the side of the woods, which thinking back on it now is probably a safety hazard due to the bear amounts in Sitka, Alaska. But our elementary schools were small, super small student bodies, definitely not as high security as schools are now. But the one really good thing about our schools in elementary school was the quality of faculty. We had some really amazing teachers, and the teachers really definitely cared about the students' well-being, my well-being, and definitely the well-being of the school community as a whole. So now we'll get to hear from my mom and my dad about their stories about elementary school and what their experiences were in elementary school.
what it was like elementary school. I'd get up in the morning and walk out the front door down Wentworth Street, 2 blocks down to Rusk Avenue, then left down to Delaware Street down a steep hill, and along Delaware Street to Trowbridge Avenue. 4 stories of cream city brick with 4-piece windows that you needed long poles from the inside to open the top parts. The rooms were full of light, and as we lined up on the spiked fence, the teachers would come out and the bell would ring and we'd go in on the hardwood floors into rooms with 14-foot ceilings and 1 teacher. Never had less than 35 students in a class. Oh, those dappled, sun-filled, leaf-filled days. And my favorite teachers would play the piano during parts of the day or at least once a week. And we had reading programs that all the students had to take part in. Color ranges, 12 levels from yellow to purple. Purple was the top. 12 levels, and you had to read all these materials. Everybody had to read those materials. Arithmetic was fairly simple at that point in elementary school. Multiplication tables were the mountain everybody had to climb, and the sooner the better. I loved my teachers. Learned a little bit from each one, sometimes more. My 6th grade teacher, my 1st grade teacher, I remember them all and their mannerisms. And mostly I remember how much they cared about, I guess, me and the other kids in the class.
Hi, my name's Amy Rowe, and I went to grade school in the years of 1972 through 1979. I started grade school in 1972, kindergarten, and I went to a small school. I can remember in kindergarten we used to take naps, so I can remember that. Honestly, a lot of my memories of grade school have faded because I'm now, 56. My key grade school years, grade 1 through 5, was spent in Upper Michigan, and I went to a public school, and honestly, I don't remember a lot about the classes, but I remember the playground. I remember having the metal swings, the merry-go-round that flies people off. There were woods that we could run around and play in, and you just have to go as far into the woods as you could hear the bell, and if you went too far and you came in late, then you did get in trouble. So we were able to run around in the woods at recess, play on all the dangerous monkey bars, things. I just remember really basic things about our grade school classes, nothing super exciting that I can recall. In grades 1 through 5, just math, reading, writing, arithmetic, art projects. I walked to school with my friend Kathy. We lived about 6 blocks away, and we would walk to school and walk back home. She lived 2 blocks away from me, so we would meet on the corner and walk to school. And that was what happened in Upper Michigan.
When thinking back to elementary school, one teacher sticks out in particular. Miss Campbell, my 1st grade teacher, really helped me in a way a lot of teachers didn't. I often struggled with reading and writing and just my literary level growing up in elementary school. And Miss Campbell was a teacher who cared enough to take time out of her teaching day and out of her actual day to come and help me. She would often after school come see me at my house, and she would help me with my reading and writing. And I think that just kind of shows how my elementary school path was kind of different than a lot of people's, being in a small town. I feel like a lot of people growing up didn't get to experience the community and like the close-knit community that SECA is. I don't think a lot of places a teacher would leave school and go to a student's home in order to continue teaching them and make sure they're able to keep up with their peers. And I think that really shows how a small town is a different experience than, let's say, a big town. Maybe the funding and the budget is a lot different. I'm sure SICA had a smaller one than a lot of schools, but I think the passion and the love that teachers had is something that's a lot different from a lot of people who went to school down south. The experiential learning that I experienced growing up was also something that differed a lot from what people down south experienced. They talk about integrating things into the classroom in a lot of our classes. Like right now, we're in a conservation of education class about environmental education in the classroom. And that made me really realize how my elementary school experience was different in that I got to experience fish dissections of king salmon that were bigger than me in elementary school. I got to hold shrimp that had just been caught from local fishermen like my dad, and I got to build bentwood boxes with indigenous community members, and I got to grow up in this experiential learning that a lot of people didn't. I think that's another reason how my elementary education differed a lot from other people's growing up. And I think that's something only you can experience in a small town. And at the time I did. So the past 2 years I've been working in the classroom as a education program student. I've gotten the opportunity to observe students, work with students, and even teach lessons in class. And I can definitely see how much elementary schools have changed since when I was in them. And you can tell even more how much they've changed since my parents were. There's so much more technology. I think that's the biggest thing. Ironically, we're in a technology class, and I'm talking about this in a technology class, but there is just an abundance of technology, something that when growing up with me, it was whiteboards, chalkboards. Maybe we'd go to the computer lab to play games, like educational games, or like write a paragraph. But now I'm seeing students, a lot of like everything is based off of the computer, whether it's in the morning reading and writing, they do their reading and writing off the computer in stations, or in math, they do their math stations over computers. And then throughout the day, their entire day is based off the technology from a smart board and computers. And I think that's really the big discrepancy from my parents going to elementary school, me going to elementary school, and now in the current time. In my parents, you can see how there was a lot less technology, a lot more free and open-ended. It was a lot more, I don't know, kind of independent learning, even though it was in a public school. You just, like, I feel like students had a lot more freedom, and I don't know, it was a lot more free-willed, kind of playing on the playground. You can run around in the woods. Well, me, it was slowly starting to integrate technology, and now it's just the technological boom in the classroom is something that I think is really shaping elementary education now. And I think that's the biggest difference from when we were in school and now currently. And I'm sure that'll be something I'll have to take to account when I'm a teacher. I'll have to make sure I'm technologically fluent in all of these things so I can help my students achieve to the best of their abilities when I'm their teacher. So overall, throughout this podcast, we were able to hear how much elementary schools have changed since the 1960s and 70s all the way to 2024. We were able to hear how there was free roaming recesses and the more classic idea of schools, math, writing, reading, all in subjects throughout the day. Well, my story, how there's technology not so much integrated in the schools, how my low-income schools didn't have what other schools had, and then now in 2024, how there's technology everywhere, whether it's smart boards, laptops for everyday learning, iPads, or any other technology throughout the classroom, whether it's audiobooks, amongst videos. There's so much, and so much has changed in overall such little time. And I think it really goes to show how much education is modernizing and how much we're in store for over the course of a few years, and how important it is to learn these skills, to be able to teach with technology and teach students how to integrate technology in their own learning so we can keep up and continue to learn at this rate that we are. That wraps up what we were going to talk about on my podcast today. This podcast has been a really amazing experience. I've been able to learn so many skills that I wouldn't have known without doing this podcast at all. I've been able to add sounds over video. I've been able to create intro music for my podcast to put over. I've been able to overlay sound bites over the podcast. I've been able to break up sound bites throughout the podcast. I've really been able to experience so much with this form of technology, and I'm really excited to see how I use it in the future. I hope to keep making podcast episodes. This was a super cool icebreaker kind of for the subject overall, and I hope maybe next time I can do another episode of this podcast. I can talk about my philosophies for teaching, other people's philosophies for teaching, a subject that I've learned about. The possibilities are endless, and I'm really excited to see where this takes me. This is Exploring Education. My name is Levi Danielson, and I'm signing off. Thank you, guys.